Welcome back, everybody, to the Locker Room podcast from DSS Coaching. I'm Ciaran Deely, and at the moment, we're going through a coaching series where we're interviewing some of the best known coaches from Ireland and abroad, whether that's technical coaches, sports scientists, performance analysts, S&C coaches, just to get a handle on some of the great work that's going on out there and to get plenty of great learnings from these experienced coaches. So I'm delighted this week to have Shane Keegan, who obviously I've followed for many of the year now through League of Ireland and GA and across multiple different sports. So I'm delighted that Shane has agreed to come on. You're very welcome, Shane, to this
Ciaran,
episode.
thanks a million. Fair play. Listen, I've really enjoyed the series so far and the other guests that you've had on. So, looking forward to doing a bit myself on it.
Very good. Okay, so for anybody who's interested, head over to our website, that's dsscoaching.ie, and you'll see membership there of a whole range of different codes: hurling, Gaelic football, club coaches, intercounty coaches. We do monthly membership and also then some e-booklets and online courses. So check it out there. Nice CPD chance for you. If you grab a little bit of free time, you can dial into it there. Okay, so just briefly on Shane's career, and I'm sure he will touch upon lots of these things throughout our talk. He's head of coaching and games for Laois GAA at the moment. He's a UEFA Pro license coach, so there's not many of them around. Former manager in the League of Ireland of Cove Ramblers, Wexford Youths, Galway United, and Dundalk, which is an amazing list of clubs to have coached and been manager with. Also, currently, he's dual manager of JK Brackens hurling and football in Tipperary, and we'll touch on that because it's quite an interesting setup and quite unique he's got there of being the dual manager. And also, as people are, I'm sure, very aware, he's a regular media contributor with Off the Ball and the 42.ie, especially focused on his League of Ireland experience. So Shane, we'll just kick off straight into it. So you've obviously been coaching across many different codes, so that's soccer and football and hurling. You can call it football if you want, or Gaelic football. I'm used to soccer being football now over here in London. So I'm just interested, what have they taught you about working with players, managing teams, and developing environments?
Yeah, I suppose probably the biggest thing here on so far has been that, across codes that the soft skills, which I would probably always put more emphasis on, really, to be honest with you, in terms of importance than the hard skills of the actual coaching content itself. The soft skills remain 100% the same across codes. For me, it's all about, regardless of whether you're taking the manager or the coach role. I think the soft skills of being able to communicate correctly, build relationships with people, get them to buy in to what you're trying to do, and maybe give a level of devotion and commitment to something that maybe they had never gone that deep with before. I think they apply the exact same across all three, whether it's Gaelic football, hurling, or soccer. I think apply exactly the same across all three. So for me, to be honest with you, in terms of the management side of things in particular, I think there's very, very little difference. I think if you're able to manage people, you're able to manage people. I think you could, by extension, even throw in the business world into that, to be honest with you. I think if you're capable of managing people, you can manage across multiple sports, and you can manage, I think you can move seamlessly between sport and business as well. But those skills are not easily developed, I suppose. And I've kind of always took a two-pronged approach to how you go about developing those skills. I think maybe the mistake some people go is they go heavy on one side or the other. And when I'm talking about the two sides, I suppose I mean the attempts to learn by reading and consuming as much knowledge in an area as you possibly can. A lot of people go that route, and then others go the other route of just throwing themselves into it head first and learning on the job. Whereas I think obviously the ideal is that you're trying to do both at the same time. I took my first coaching slash management gig. I was playing under 18 soccer in my local club, and the following season I was the under 18 manager in my local club. So what, that's 19. I'm unfortunately 43 at this stage. So very nearly 25 years experience at it at this stage. And while early on it was very much a case of figuring it out and learning as you go, you then start to realize actually there is an endless amount of resources out there that I can start consuming, that it doesn't always have to be learned from your mistakes. Sometimes you might actually be able to find out the lessons other people learn from their mistakes, and it might save you having to make that mistake yourself. That you can piggyback on what they picked up from their mistakes. So I do consume a huge amount of stuff, while also I would say I have genuinely managed, coached at least one team every year for those 25 years since. So I'm getting the best of both worlds, very much getting to learn on the job as I go as well.
Yeah, and it sounds, and I know just, from hearing you in different media interviews and everything, like you're obviously a great believer in the formalized coaching pathway as well, the courses, because you do get a lot, even like in professional football over in England and UK and everything, of some coaches or managers who've been previous players, and they say, well, it's a waste of time. There's nothing somebody in a classroom can teach me about coaching or about understanding the game.
Yeah, definitely. And even your question is kind of timely in that just Monday past, we had a CPT event for the UEFA Pro license up in Johnstown House in Enfield. Very well organized event. And it kind of re-emphasized, and another point that it re-emphasized to me is sometimes, Ciaran, we can be a little bit snobby about our learning. There's certain people we think we can learn from, and then maybe others that we feel, what have they got for me to actually learn from? And look, when the timetable came out for that CPD event, I'll be honest with you, I saw it was an hour and a half with a guy called Cliff Byrne. I knew little to nothing of Cliff Byrne, Ciaran, and did a quick bit of Googling to see that he'd had a fairly strong playing career in the lower divisions. But more importantly, for what he was doing with us, I suppose, he had gone in as assistant manager at a couple of different clubs with Grant McCann, former Northern Ireland international, who coincidentally I had done my A license with up in the IFA. Um, he presented to us for maybe a little over an hour on Monday, Ciaran, and as I say, having not really known who he was going in, I took a massive amount from him. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. Because if you think about it, like, let's say, let's say they had Pep Guardiola instead of Cliff Byrne. Okay, realistically, for a person operating at the levels I have operated most of my career and likely to operate for the rest of my life in coaching, what am I actually going to learn from Pep Guardiola that's applicable to my life? Like, he lives on a different planet. Everything he does is on a different planet to anything I'll ever experience. Whereas Cliff has just won League Two with Doncaster, with Grant. A lot of the challenge he spoke about, a lot of the things that they try to do are real and implementable at my kind of level. Similar challenges
Yeah.
that I face, similar solutions that I could apply going forward. So yeah, I suppose just on your broader point about where the learning can be gotten, all that, like, don't don't turn your nose up at any opportunity. I know everything is time bound and we're all time sensitive, but where you can avail of any opportunity. I'm sitting in the Centre of Excellence here in Port at the moment. Some of the best learning I got from a GAA point of view. We've been absolutely blessed to have Ross Munley as our lead football coach this year, and Niall Corkin as our lead hurling coach this year with our two county senior teams. Just been able to lean against the fence and watch those two boys operate for an hour during a training session is an incredible learning experience in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And across different sports, and obviously you're you're the proof of that. I mean, there's not many GA coaches or heads of coaching or anything in the GA world with a UEFA Pro license. Like, do you? I'm interested in that. Like, do you want to explain first of all to our audience what that actually means, and also, I suppose going back as well, like what was it that made you go from like under 18 player to the next year then under 18 coach? Because coaching is not for everyone. Like, I know lots of brilliant players I've played with and against and everything, never had any interest in going into coaching.
Yeah, look, I suppose as a player, Kieran, I was limited is probably a compliment to me, to put it mildly. But the one thing I suppose I had was that I could see it. I could see what needed to be done. I didn't have the capability to do it, but I could see it. So I could. So that at least meant I had a little bit of a brain, I suppose, in my head for understanding the games and stuff like that. And then the other thing that probably worked in my favor was, even though I would have been, probably one of the lesser players in most of the teams I would have been involved in, I did still find that quite often managers would appoint me captain and that sort of stuff. And players seemed to, respond to, I was quite good at organizing things and putting people in places and giving them, kind of little instructions that, when they responded to it, seemed to get a decent response, I suppose. So there was maybe a bit of a skill set of a budding coach there, even if my playing ability was extremely limited. Um, and yeah, I just kind of dived head first into it the following season. There was nobody to look after our youth team in Clover United, is the name of my local club in Rathdowney and Laois. There was nobody to look after that youth team. So I just kind of said, look, I'll go at it. I suppose I would have been a mature enough sort of a young fella. And while I was a bit worried about how the players would respond, no, they kind of bought into it pretty quickly. So yeah, just launched in head first, really. Did that for 2 or 3 years, and I suppose I went off to Australia when I was 21 for a year, Kieran, and it was when I came back from that, that that was when I probably got into it more formally. Um, I signed up for an FAI coaching course that was delivered by a guy called Noel O'Reilly, who was then and is still the best coach educator I have ever come across. He had an unbelievable kind of impact on me, and kind of essentially came away from those early courses under Noel with my mind made up that this was it. Like, rather than it being a pastime, I wanted this to actually kind of become my life. And I wanted to become Noel O'Reilly, if that makes sense. Like the way he communicated with coaches and players, the way he made them feel, everything. It was kind of a conscious decision at that stage. That's what I wanted to be. And listen, I took a long route, Kieran, because I wasn't as focused in school as I probably should have been, and didn't get the points to do probably sports related courses in college. I went a very, very long route around it. I was working in sales. I took my first full-time job in sport at 33, 34 years of age. So I was in sales, the guts of 15 years as a means to an end, before eventually
Although
getting to
you probably learned plenty in that in the
Hu
sales
hu
as well.
hugely so, yeah, hugely so. I do say my first proper job in sales was I worked for a company called Suits You, which obviously was selling suits. So it was in an outlet in Rathdowney, and they had a thing called the 10 Golden Rules, which was essentially a kind of a guide to how to communicate with people and how to understand the psyche of sales and all of that kind of thing. And like that stuff genuinely has still stood to me. They used to say that, when you're selling suits, one fella could walk in and he could be a high court judge who could be heading off to preside over a court that morning, and you have to be able to meet him on his level, communicate with him on his level, to a point whereby he wants to purchase a suit off you. And he could walk out the door, and the next person to walk in the door could be the young fella who is set to sit in front of him in court because he's been caught on some kind of misdemeanor, and he's due in front of that same judge. And you have to be able to meet him on his level, communicate with him in a way that makes him feel comfortable and makes him want to buy into you and makes him want to buy a suit off you. And that is kind of sport a little bit as well. The various different
Yeah,
personalities you're going to meet, and trying
yeah,
to connect with them all, that they all want to buy into what you're espousing, I suppose.
that is a good way of thinking of it. I'm glad you recommended that one. And do you want to just like briefly explain then the like what is the pro license? How do you get to that level? Because obviously there's lots of people who will understand that, but like in my world, obviously pro license is the top of the top level for a coach to get to as regards their I guess kind of like academic achievement in coaching is how I think of it. Like it's not a degree, but in ways like it kind of is. It's a
Yeah.
formalized training and learning course.
Yeah, and look, in terms of the work that goes into it as well. And to be honest with you, Kieran, I did mine at a time where it was still a reasonably manageable load. I think the work that the amount of kind of paperwork and forms and projects and all that goes into a pro license now, I think I got away quite lightly based on what I've seen over the last few years. I mean, I got my pro license. I think I'm still the youngest pro license holder well, at the time of getting it, unfortunately not the youngest now, but at the time point of getting it,
Yeah,
I got my pro license at 28 years of age. So I had a thirst for knowledge and I was in a hurry as well. I wanted to get better and I wanted to get better fast. I suppose the proof of that is in the fact that I did what used to be called Kickstart 1, progressed on to Kickstart 2 quite quickly, onto Youth Cert, and was up as far as UEFA B, rattled through all of those at a good rate of knots. Then obviously the waiting lists kind of come in a little bit more. And I applied for the A license, but there were people who had applied for the A license well in advance of me that were still waiting on it. And by chance, I got a phone call from somebody who had some connections up with the IFA. And the week before their A license was due to start, somebody had withdrawn. And I basically got a phone call to say, if you're in a position to go immediately and relocate yourself up there for a week as of Monday coming, they can take you up there. So that's what I actually did. I sat my A license up at the IFA, which was great just to get a different association's idea of learning and how they structured and how they go about it. Um, and then, yeah, I got a bit of a stroke of luck with the pro license. Again, obviously, here there's a big waiting list to get on a pro license. And to be fair to the FAI, they have to, I suppose, they have to show favour to those that are operating at the top level. So it would have been very, very hard to get on a pro license without working in the League of Ireland. And at the time, I was working in what was the old third tier, the League of Ireland A Championship.
yeah,
Some people might remember it, but I actually had applied for the pro license. I got word back that morning that I hadn't been accepted onto it. This was around the first or second week of December. I got word back that morning that I hadn't been accepted onto it because it was pretty much just League of Ireland Premier and First Division clubs, managers that were getting onto it in that cohort. Um, and that afternoon, um, I got offered the Wexford Youths job by Mick Wallace. So I literally had to reply to the email saying, "Guys, just to let you know, I'm just after accepting a role as manager at Wexford Youths for the upcoming League of Ireland First Division season. Does this change my circumstances in any way, shape, or form?"
yeah,
And even though I'm the same person,
yeah.
I get an email back saying, "Yep, you're in. Here's the start date," kind of thing. Which I understand. The kind of with the FAI, their hands are tied a little bit there in terms of who they can and can't make exceptions for. So yeah, I got quite lucky with the speed at which I was able to progress up along the levels.
Yeah, very good. I have plenty of experience with Mick Wallace myself. I played under him for Wexford Youths up to 18s, and then the GA world kind of sucked me in more. Yeah, but a colorful character.
A great fella.
Okay, there's a really, really interesting story all about your League of Ireland journey, which I know people would be interested in, but I think there are other places they can find that journey
Yep.
as well. And to keep the focus on the GA world and the audience who are listening, we'll switch over to your current role as head of coaching and games in Laois. And as you said off air, like every county has one. There's different titles, different terminology around it. But I think it's interesting for people to hear like what your main focus is there. Like I know it's kind of running the whole games program, the coaching. I'm fascinated. Like, is it focused on bringing in as many players as possible into the system? Is it creating those elite players to play with, Laois senior team? What about the pathway for the coaches? What
Mm,
about the structures for the clubs? Like when I worked with Dublin GA back um, in the late noughties, because we had a games promotion officer in every club and sometimes two of them, we did an awful lot of work on the structures of the club ourselves, and then the people who were managing us kind of took a much more kind of standoffish managerial role. But I know for, let's call it, more rural counties, like not every club will have a dedicated coach, or maybe now at this stage you're getting to that level. So I'm just interested for you personally then in your role, what's going to be your main focus to kind of get the biggest bang for your buck?
Yeah, it is very much a management and oversight role, Kieran, to be honest with you. I progressed on from what was a GPO role. I was GPO with Portlaoise, which was extremely hands-on. You know, you're in the schools every day, you're in the club every evening, you're upskilling coaches. You know, you're literally doing everything and you are at the forefront of it all. And it took a bit of adjusting to go from that to a role where I am essentially, you know, sitting in a chair for 90% of my week, really, and you're planning and you're scheming and you're trying to come up with the big picture stuff. And a huge amount of your role, again, thankfully, where the skill set overlaps with which coaching and management is a huge amount of role again is just building relationships. You know, you could be this is the kind in my opinion, this is the kind of role where you could absolutely so easily be a busy fool. You could be working 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week in the role and essentially not maybe progressing things along a huge amount for your county. Whereas you know, the way I've probably described it before is if I can have a coffee or a conversation with 5 or 6 people over the course of a week who during that conversation, if I sell them a role or sell them a vision of something we're trying to achieve, they come away from that going, yeah, yeah, I'll perform that role for you over the next while, or I'm happy to take on that remit for you over the next while on a purely voluntary basis, by the way. You know, this is the vast majority of the time, this is the conversation I'm having, is trying to enthuse somebody to take on a big responsibility or role in a voluntary capacity. If I'm successful in doing that with 2, 3 people over the course of a week, and they end up giving 10 hours a week to their club or county within that role for the next 2, 3 years of their life, I mean, that drastically outweighs anything I could ever do by pumping in the hours myself. I could never
Yeah.
get close to matching the amount of hours that they would be putting in. So that is a huge part of the role, is meeting people, you know, explaining to them what you're looking for from them, why you think they're the ideal fit for the role, how you're going to support them and provide them with the you know, everything they need to try and be successful while performing that kind of duty for you. Um, and look, I love it. There's been a massive amount of goodwill in the county. Look, we you know, we're not stupid. We're coming from quite far back in the pack in both codes. We haven't been as successful as we would have liked over the last decade or more. But that to me probably gives us more scope for improvement. You know, if you go into if you go into Kerry GA, you know, well, you know, tell me how you're going to improve Kerry GA. That list is pretty small. You know, tell me how you're, or certainly on the football side, tell me how you're going to improve Gaelic football in the County of Laois, how you're going to improve hurling in the County of Laois. I mean, the list is endless of what's out there that needs to be done, and probably the biggest job, Kieran, to be honest, is trying to prioritize. You know, you can't do everything at once, and some of the stuff that you'd love to immediately sink your teeth into has to be put on the back burner because you realize, well, this is a little bit more important. And you know, like I would say for us at the moment, you know, I'm pretty much 2 years in the gig this week, and I suppose I would have recognised early on that maybe at post-primary level, Laois weren't operating at the, you know, you look obviously at what goes on in hurling in Kilkenny in the post-primary level. Kildare, another one of our neighbours in football at post-primary level, you know, the likes of an ace and that, absolutely nailing it. We didn't really have that in Laois, and yet despite knowing that we didn't have it, I was so consumed with other things for the last couple of years that I never really got a chance to give a proper focus to that. That's probably one of our main focuses for 2025 into 2026 is how can we support the post-primary area better? How can we get full-time staff involved there to, you know, volunteer hours at schools level is not what it used to be. I suppose, you know, everybody has more draws on their time. So that's an area that we're putting a massive focus on. So you know, the 3 4 key projects that your primary focus is on will constantly change and constantly chops and changes as you're going along. And yeah, it's deciding what those key things that are going to take up the majority of your time and resources are at any given time is one of the biggest decisions within the role.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's very interesting. And like for the club's games promotion officer or GDA or whatever you want to call
Mm.
it in each county, like they're obviously focused on getting as many children into the system as possible and then keeping them in the system. does your focus become a little bit more like, I'm not trying to think of a different word than saying like the elite level?
Yeah, it's a dirty word, isn't it?
It is, it is, it is, especially now with more research coming out and everything. Okay, you're obviously, your remit is the county,
Yep.
the leash in general. So you're looking after all those GPOs within the clubs. But at what point through like the development squads and obviously post-primary school teams are representative teams. They're the best of
Yep.
the club players as well. Like I was very, very lucky to go to Good Counsel College in Uras. Shout out to those lads, who off the back of Good Counsel and St. Peter's in Wexford and to a lesser extent Gorey and Matty Ford. Wexford then were successful, relatively successful, let's say, over the ensuing years. But how much of focus of yours then has to kind of go to that lesser number of players?
Yeah, well, there's a blast from the past. I tried and failed to sign Matty Ford at Wexford Youths, actually,
No
Ciaran. So
way.
I did. No,
Brilliant.
yeah, look, it is, and again, it's been an evolving one. My thoughts on it now are probably a little bit different from my thoughts on it when I came into the role. I was very much a let's make the base of the pyramid as wide as we possibly can and follow that traditional approach of it funneling the whole way up along. And I think, my first year in the role at under 14, which would be our first academy level, we would have had 50, kind of 50 to 55 maybe in both codes, as our academy panels that year. And then you see it operate in reality, and reality can be a little bit different than theory. And what you find is, if you were setting up a particular practice, Kieran, and it involves, player A striking to player B, B striking to player C, if player A is the best under 14 in the county, and he's passing to player B, who's the second best under 14 in the county, and then he's passing to player C, who's number 52 in the county, there's problems there. There's problems there because number 52, kids are extremely, realistic in terms of their own ability. They know how good they are. They absolutely know how good they are. And if you're number 52 when you're receiving it from number 2 when you're going to have to play it to number 4, you're half terrified. You're terrified you're going to make a mistake there. I'm not of this standard. What happens if I let them down, kind of a thing. And likewise, the players who are in the top, 5 or 6 in the county become frustrated with that player not being able to perform to the same level, and that kind of thing. So we have started to take a kind of a different approach on it. Rightly or wrongly, you can argue this one all day long. So we've kind of gone with, trimmed down A panels, or academy panels of kind of in and around, more so in around the 30 mark, and then development panels operating underneath that of another 20 to 25, and they would train separately and have, different schedules and agendas and all of that kind of thing. And I think that is probably working a little bit better for us. I think the big thing here is, and I've learned this probably the hard way as well, is not to have a target number. Like if you tell a coach, okay, we're going to have 30 in next year's under 14 panel. He can go either of two. He can get caught either of two ways. There might be more than 30 very high standard players, and he's leaving out 6 or 7 high standard players because he was told 30, even though there's 36 or 37 in the county. So that's a problem, obviously. Or he might have 24 high standard players, and he's pulling in another 6 who he knows aren't of the level because he was told 30. So we're kind of trying to make it a little bit more bespoke, if we can at all. And let's have our assessment process. Let's see the players playing in their club environment. Let's bring them into the centre of excellence and get a look at them. And now let's decide, okay, how many high standard players do we think we have in either code, for that year? And okay, let's go with that rather than setting a target that we need to work with. So definitely my stance has probably changed on that a bit as we've gone along. We've been I know you know who I'm going to reference here, but we're quite lucky as well in that obviously you try and pull on different people and try and learn from different people. Anya McNamara is living here in Laois. So she is. I would have massive time and respect for Anya's level of knowledge, and I would have bounced some of this stuff off of her as well in trying to come to decisions around the appropriate numbers. And listen, she is at the forefront of kind of the whole talent development research in the county. So she's been a brilliant person to kind of lean on around this. But listen, I won't say we have it right, but I think we've improved it year on year as I've kind of gained a bit more knowledge, and things are not based in theory now, they're based in actual reality of what I'm seeing on the ground, you know.
Yeah, it can be it can be different. I think I mean, you're very lucky, but also you've gone about it in the right way of tapping into that knowledge and the research that's been done by somebody who's an expert in the field. Like for anybody who doesn't know, Anya uh, is heading up the professional doctorate program up in DCU, or has been at different pre recently, but also has done a lot of work with the GA as well about talent identification and development and ever. And she was my sports psychology lecturer back in UL in the early noughties. So she must have been quite young at that time. Her career.
She's listening. She's brilliant, and look, she's involved at Coalface. You know, she's coaching away with her own daughter's teams. Again across sports. I know. Certainly one of her daughters, I think, is showing a huge amount of talent in swimming. So it's again, she's dealing in reality, not just what's wrote in books.
Yeah, yeah, great. Just leading on from that then, because I'm thinking of some of our audience will be just underage club coaches, but also maybe a coaching officer within their club. eh, I'm like there are guidance there and everything like that, but sometimes it's a little bit like your setup where there are so many things to do across
Mm.
the coaches, the players, the structures, etc. Like I really like what you've said about prioritizing those kind of bigger, longer term projects, and they may shift and change, um, and just kind of the working with the reality on the ground and seeing what you see in front of your eyes. Is there anything else like that you could advise those club coaching officers in their clubs?
Oh, listen, I feel sorry for the coaching officers in Laois because we have a WhatsApp group set up for them all there, and their heads must be absolutely busted with the amount of stuff. Myself and one of the guys here in the office, Dean Malone, would be the other kind of key person in driving that sort of content with them. Yeah, I suppose, look, what are the things that I've found coaching officers and that have latched onto? My clear distinction here now. My son's GA club, not my GA club. I moved area, Ciaran, so I'm right down the Earl man, but I moved out to herself's area, so we now live in Cotton. So my son is hurling with Cotton, and they have put together an absolutely outstanding player pathway document that they give to every coach and every parent that comes in, that literally shows every step of their beliefs of what are the key attributes technically, tactically, physically, mentally, the environment, how the environment needs to evolve and change in the different age groups, all of that the whole way through. I did a presentation for Leinster GEA at their recent conference, and I just threw up the contact number and email address at the end, and said, look, if I can be of help to anybody on any of the stuff I've spoken on, let me know. I got a deluge of people coming to me saying the player pathway, the Bursky Cotton player pathway document, is there any chance you have that in a Word or a PDF format? And listen, there's brilliant guys, brilliant people involved in Bursky Cotton. They had absolutely no problem with me sharing it with anybody who needed it. So that kind of North Star document almost, if that makes sense. I think is a huge thing. And then I suppose outside of that, it's just, how effective, I'm specifically thinking of the coaching officer role here, I suppose, is how effective can you be in driving and persuading people to engage in the coach education process? Because it's not easy. So it's not, and again, everybody's time is limited. And a lot of a lot of volunteers who maybe stuck their hand up for, I'm willing to help out here on a station with my son's under 7 team, and they're still involved 4 years later, and now you're looking to send them off on award ones and award twos, and they're maybe, hold on, whoa, this is not exactly what I signed up to here, kind of a thing. And I think the really important thing is that while the introduction to coaching Gaelic games is compulsory, and rightly so, because it gives the real foundations around how to coach kids. The rest of the awards are not compulsory, and clubs should never treat them as compulsory. Certain volunteers within your club are there for the reasons I've just outlined. They're there to support and try and be somewhat helpful. But do they want to be, have they got a massive thirst for coaching and a massive thirst for more and more knowledge around it? No, they don't. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But there's probably two or three people in your club, like a young me, like a young you, who have got a graw for it, and who absolutely, if somebody came and put an arm around their shoulder and says, listen, we see something in you here as a young coach, and we'd love to help you on your pathway, and maybe, pay for you to go off and do a course here or there, and different stuff like that. And we think we might phone the county, and maybe recommend, maybe you might get involved with one of their development squads. They're always looking for people, and it could be a potential learning experience for yourself. All of that. It's trying to identify those few people and trying to put the arm around them and get them on side, because when you find somebody good like that, I'm thinking of a young coach in my own club in Rathdowney Earl at the moment, who's progressing fantastically as a coach. What is he? Very early 20s still, very, very early 20s. And I see huge potential in him. And, you nearly get excited about where it could take him. It's spotting those people and creating a pathway for them, I think, is massive.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I love it. I like nice practical advice like that. That's great. Look, listen, you're not too bad with your son with different clubs. I have with my son different countries, so I need to keep that in check. When he's
That's
when
a
he's
whole
start,
different level of a
when,
problem.
when he started to shout for England when the English football team come up on screen.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Although it,
Well,
it, it, it it cuts as deep. Trust me, it cuts as deep
oh
down
yeah,
at local level.
local rivalry is worse. Okay, great. And just switching focus then to into your management role with JK Brackens. I think it's quite unique. There's probably not many dual clubs with a dual manager. I
Hmm.
can see some real benefits to it. I'm sure there are, you know, challenges involved as well. I suppose what have you learned from that process? Does it work? And how do you structure training? Because this question comes up a lot with our club coaches is like how in your club do you work the kind of dual sports and codes?
Yeah, and look, not to burst your bubble on this, but I'm going to give an answer that works for JK Brackens. I'm not sure how many versions of JK Brackens there are out there, because when people think there's a single definition for a dual club, that's absolutely not the case, because there's a dual club where, if you look at, I'm in Portlaoise here at the moment, okay? Portlaoise are a dual club, okay, operating at senior level in both codes. There's a massive population here in Portlaoise. The crossover between guys playing senior hurling for Portlaoise and senior football for Portlaoise is very small. Very, very, very small. So they are a dual club, 100% a dual club, but in that version of a dual club. Um, Believe it or not, at JK Brackens, of our, say, my core senior 25 this year, 24 of the 25 are absolute out and out dual players. Absolute out and out dual players. Nearly pretty much, Kieran, down to the same positions, to be honest with you, in the vast majority of cases. So it just makes that so easy to manage, incredibly easy. We've had two young fellas come up out of minor this year. One young fella, I don't know how he managed it, because it's just everybody is a dual player in Brackens. But for some reason, anyway, we've got one young fella who's come up who only plays football and doesn't hurl. And we've got another young fella who's come up who is a dual player, but is coming back from a long-term injury and doesn't think his body would be able to immerse himself in both right now. So he's just hurling for this year. Will probably become a dual player again next year. So literally, they're the only two people I need to make special arrangements around. Everybody else trains 100% for whatever we're training for that week. And look, I know some clubs go differently. I think it was the Schlockneil approach maybe that I read where they do a bit of both in every session. We don't. We go all in on whatever we've got that weekend. So if we've got a challenge match, say league earlier in the year, challenge matches now throughout the month of June, and then into championship once we kind of hit July. It's kind of week on, week off in tip. Simple, fairly straightforward. Or sorry, one code one week, one code the other. And it's very simple. If we've got an upcoming hurling match on Saturday evening or Sunday morning, we'll do two hurling training sessions that week, with an S&C session in between. If we've got a football match that weekend, we'll do two football training sessions that week. We will encourage the players to hit the ball wall in whichever code we're not training on that week. Absolutely. And they're very, very good to do that. So if we're playing football on Sunday, we'll train for football on Tuesday and Friday. We'll get an S&C session in on a Wednesday, and we'll say to the lads, can you try and your hurl, get your slater, get to a ball wall on Monday evening for 20 minutes, after your gym session on Wednesday evening for 15, 20 minutes. So your touch is in, your eye is in, you're getting used to smacking the ball off the wall and doing things first time and at pace. And likewise, if it's the other way around, it's a hurling week. Okay, can you do a little bit of football? We had a hurling training session last night. And when the hurling training session finished, Jack Kennedy, who's one of the rare fellas who's actually plays in two very different positions. Jack is our hurling goalkeeper and he's our football corner forward. When the hurling training session finished last night, without any prompting, Jack walked in, got a bag of footballs, brought them out, and did a bit of work on his free taking and his finishing by himself. Which is exactly what you want to see. But as I say, when you're in the rare situation that we're in Brackens, and by the way, this is not something I have implemented. This is all they've ever known. Since
Right.
they were seven, they train for
Yeah.
hurling and then they have a hurling match at the weekend. Then they train for football and then they have a football match at the weekend. So it's nothing new to them. It's all they've ever known, to be honest with you. Now up until now, they have always gone with two different managers,
Mm.
and two different coaches. I'm not sure how that ever worked. Jesus, how do you serve two masters like that when they're both trying to get their pound of flesh from you? I don't know. Um, because I suppose there's maybe not a huge amount of people who are reasonably comfortable across both codes in the manner that
Yeah.
I've done with them. But yeah, I think it works. I think it works a dream. Look, what I will say, Alan Kieran, is last year I overstretched myself. Last year it was pretty much on the coaching side of things, it was kind of me and me alone, and I took every minute of every session in both codes. Last year went reasonably well. The club kind of see, okay, this is a guy that's running a reasonably decent ship and that we'd like to hang on to. I'm able to then put forward a case for, could we look at a little bit of extra investment so that I could bring in somebody, underneath me on the hurling side, somebody underneath me or underneath slash alongside more so, in both codes. So I have got a specific hurling coach working with
Yeah.
me on my hurling weeks and a specific football coach working with me on my football weeks. And that has definitely progressed what we're doing. We're doing things to a far higher standard this year than last year. And the other big plus with that one then, Ciaran, is that on our football week, our hurling coach is able to do quite a bit of video analysis and planning for the
Right.
following week. And on our hurling week, our football coach is able to do quite a bit of video analysis and planning for the following week while I immerse myself in both.
Yeah, really, because obviously, if it's the same person, they're, as busy as you are, so gives them a little bit of breathing space to do that extra work behind the scenes. Yeah, so it's quite unique. Like you're a unique coach in that you have the abilities of to turn your hand to Gaelic football and hurling, but also the club is quite unique, and the players are in similar positions, as you say, playing both codes. I mean, obviously, how Tipperary have set it up as well of just alternating weekends is a real positive, which it doesn't happen everywhere. So
Mm.
maybe that's a lesson to that. I was going to ask you about just the comparison of hurling in Tipperary and Laois, but we might leave that for another day because it's probably another conversation to have. I just want to switch focus a little bit then on the FRC rules, but not in terms of do you agree with them, etc. What are your own opinions? That's very interesting. But I think like there has been a lot of talk about how the new rules will go at both local level but also at youth level. And I think just to keep the focus on kind of the youth level really in this conversation, like I'm not involved in underage GA teams at the moment myself, personally, directly. Um, so I'm interested just to see, like, how are they managing the new rules, and I guess, like, what kind of advice you would have to the coaches out there about just, do they need to change their practices or their training sessions? Is it the same old game, the same skills and abilities and everything like that, or what's your own kind of personal experience of it?
Yeah, and again, you're asking me the question, I suppose, at a very good time in that we would have had our under 13 finals here, football finals here, league finals on Friday night just past. And I actually would have been watching them with our Cushman and Og chairman, who is also a referee. So
Okay.
I was kind of asking him the questions you just asked me. So I was. And look, he's loved the new rules as a referee, refereeing predominantly underage games. He said the solo and go in particular has been absolutely excellent. And then obviously from his point of view as a referee, the whole improvements around back chat and discipline and all of that kind of stuff. He said the one big challenge is he says he's going to have to seriously work on his fitness levels.
Very good.
He said it's incredible. He says you just can't catch a breath. He says you
Yeah.
can't catch a breath. He says, previously a young fella gets fouled and he goes down and you have a chance to come across and you have a chat with the player and all of that kind of stuff and and it might be 10 seconds before the ball comes alive again, whereas now it's solo and go and off he goes and poor referee is trying to catch up with play as quickly as he can. But like there was so much apprehension around the rules, Ciaran, and people saying adults are going to struggle with this. Never mind, kids, and that just hasn't proven to be the case based on our on the ground experience. They've a complete understanding of the rules. They seem to really enjoy the new rules. They all got a grasp of them very, very quickly, and it is the same old game with some tweaks and improvements made to it that have led to a more enjoyable game for, well, certainly as a spectator, I think to watch, but more importantly, from those that are playing it, they seem to all enjoy playing the game that bit more. Look, I will hold my hand up here. I am a massive, massive, massive Jim Gavin fan. I think this man is in the, there's kind of 1% of people in your life that you meet that are just on a
Yeah.
different level to the other 99% of us, and I think Jim is in those is in that 1%. And I think him and the rest of the crew that he has behind them, I think they've done a brilliant job in terms of the effects on coaching. Yeah, again, I'll be honest with you. Like last year on the football coaching front, I was quite. It was definitely the newest of the games to me in terms of I had a lot more knowledge on the soccer front and on the hurling front than I had on the Gaelic football front, and I was very much learning on the go last year. Um, but I was struggling maybe a little bit to come up with content on a bi-weekly basis that would keep the players engaged and were relatable to the game. So much of the game had become same. Whereas I think the brilliant thing for coaches is I think the new rules have just given us so much more coaching content. I really do. Early on, we got Colin Nally into a workshop here for coaches in Laois GAA. He delivered a fantastic practical workshop where he put on maybe 4 or 5 different sections to the training session over an hour and a half, and each of them was based around a different rule. So you might have had a particular game, let's say, not to go too in deep on it, but let's say you've got a 6v3 in a 25 by 25 yard area, and then the distance between the 45 and the 21, the distance that they would have to kick it to get a mark, you would put another grid that far apart. And can the six create an opportunity to kick down to the 6v3 at the other end and claim a mark? So you're tilting the odds in the favour of the team, try and give them the best chance of success. That was a brilliant one. Another one, a brilliant one he did on that day was just had a large grid marked out, maybe 40 by 40, and it was, I don't know, 8v8 in the grid. And they were kicking and they had to kick again. They had to kick a minimum of kind of 10 to 15 yards and catch. But when they caught the ball, for the score to count, when they caught the ball, they had to hand it to an opposition player. So the
Very
idea the idea there was to get them into the habit of you
good.
are going to have to get used to handing a ball into the
Yeah.
hands of an opposition player. I thought that was very, very clever. Very, very
Yeah,
clever.
and right in the moment where, like, because I know I can see it when a player gives away a foul, and the referee blows whistle because of some technical foul or whatever it is, the last thing they're thinking of is like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to hand the ball back to the opposition player that, is my enemy for the day.
Absolutely. And then even cleverer to layer another bit on top of that. Next part of that was, well, now for the score to count. Let's say I kick it to you, Ciaran. You catch the ball, okay, and you hand it over to an opposition player. So there's a score for you. But the opposition player, we're now making it also a solo and go game. So when you hand it to the opposition player, if he doesn't immediately solo and go, I'm giving you another point. He's messed up there. Your team gets another point. So you can be so creative with the new rules. I just think it adds so much more scope for coming up with coaching content, to be honest.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, all positive. I mean, we're at the moment we're very used to like watching as spectators. The senior intercounty obviously is coming to the culmination of the season and it's been amazing, like the best. I'm enjoying the games again.
Yeah,
I'm reading about it and listening podcasts and you're just engaged. But it's really nice to hear that the kids, it's not such a big change for them. The rules are the rules and they'll just play within the rules, and that's how they tend to do it. But I agree, and I do know even from our own gang of DSS coaches, there's just an appetite for more, more practices and chance to be creative. So yeah, it's all positive.
absolutely.
Great. All right, we'll finish up then just with we normally have 5 quick fire questions. So whatever pops into your head right away, just shoot them out, and we'll wrap up then. Okay, and maybe you've answered a couple. Who knows? So first one, who is the best coach you've ever worked with or learned from?
The mad thing is here, Kieran, is to say I'm nearly embarrassed by it, but I'm coaching 25 years. And as I say, this year the club backed me by bringing in another hurling coach to work alongside me and football coach. So the football coach is a guy called Paul Cahalan. Would have been the mainstay of a very dominant Portlaoise team here. He's outstanding, Kieran. He's absolutely outstanding. He is literally, the academic research papers that you read about how we should be going about coaching, and Knurk is involved in a few of them, and different guys like this. It's like if you put all of those academic papers into a machine, Paul Catalan is the coach that would be spat out at the other end. He's like so textbook. It's unbelievable in terms of the how he goes about creating the content, his questioning of players. I would be very guilty of talking to players and giving them just instruction rather than trying to draw information from them and throwing questions at them and all of that. He's absolutely brilliant in that area. So yeah, this is his first year coaching. I'm at it a lot longer, and it was supposed to be him learning from me this year, but
Yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of turned out to be the other way around.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, I have to say that shows the quality of the coach that you are, that you can, even after all these years, you can learn from. I'm going to call him a novice coach, even though he's
Yeah,
lots of experience within the game, obviously. But you can learn from that, and that's brilliant. You have to be open to everything like that. Um, okay, so without thinking of him, what current player or coach should we be watching and learning from?
yeah, I'll go one close to home and I'll go another one a lot further from home. The close to home one, I am obsessed with Knurk. I know it might seem a strange week to be bringing this up after them finally having a bad day last weekend. But I am obsessed with him. I think he operates, to be honest with you, on a different level to any of us. I think it's incredible to watch what he's done with that team. How he's bringing academic research to the grass, and it's working. And I just find it amazing, and I'll include myself in this, to be honest with you. I find it amazing in the GAA where there's such a copy and paste culture. There's almost none of us copy and pasting what Knock is doing.
Yeah,
Almost none. His whole thing of whole part whole, that whole approach that he's into, and absolutely everything being games based and all of that. There's still a very small percentage of us that are actually conducting our training sessions in that manner. I mean, I'm saying to you there that I'm obsessed with them, yet I will still go into my training session and use unobstructed drills, and I'll maybe go part before eventually going whole. So I'm obsessed with them, but I'm still not fully copying him. And if he's having the success he is, why are we not completely just going his
that's
route?
That's our a very early New Year resolution then for 2026.
Yeah,
We have
the
to go.
one The one further afield, that I'm jumping sport here again. I absolutely adore Steve Kerr. I
Oh
just
yeah.
his communication, his man management, his willingness to really, really hand the driving of the ship to the players. And very much kind of be seen as the facilitator here, guys. This is your baby. I'm just here to try and steer it a little bit and give you a little bit of direction. But by and large, this is your baby here. I love that approach, and I read absolutely anything I can get my hands on around Kerr.
Yeah, takes a lot of courage to do that, definitely. Okay, what's your go-to coaching resource, whether that's book, podcasts, um, social media account, and that's forgetting about um, any of our own stuff or any of the guys that you mentioned, but is there anything else that we should be dipping into?
Look, I probably would point to two or three, and then kind of nearly come at it from another angle. I genuinely do think the stuff you have up is outstanding. The stuff that the Lavin brothers have up on Game Sense is outstanding. Of all the different manuals, I've got a couple of Barry's manuals, but Brendan O'Driscoll's one, Brendan from Cork, he brought out a fantastic one. But to be honest with you, I've probably got to the point, Kieran, where the stuff that works best for me is my own self-designed stuff. And in that sense, I think sometimes I would be a massive, massive believer in start at the end, as in, well, what's the desired outcome from this session? What are we hoping to be a little bit better at in 75 minutes than we are now? Okay, right. If that's the desired outcome, now what content do I need to design to help us reach that point? I think sometimes when you've got a huge amount of content, on the internet or in books or that, you can tend to just take the lazy approach and, well, that looks good. I'm going to use that. But, well, does that actually have any bearing on on your desired outcome? If not, why are you doing it? Just because it looked good or just because it works in somebody else's context? So, look, if I look at last night's session, my other coach took the first 35 minutes. I took the following 35 minutes. My two activities in my 35 minutes were based on things that we hadn't done particularly well in our last game. We're hoping to do well in our next game. And I had self-designed practices that I hope might make us a little bit better at that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think you're going from like you're kind of more novice coach who just give me drills, give me games, give me practices to the point where like, okay, I can take these and adapt them to
Yeah,
finally the more experienced coach where you're like, okay, what's happening in the games? What's happening within the dynamic of the team that I need to get to? And then, yeah, designing your practices from there. Really
yeah.
interesting. Um, Second last one, what's your biggest coaching mistake and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, this is a very easy one, and apologies to anybody who has heard me already say this elsewhere. I think I actually it actually came up in conversation on off the ball on Saturday when I was up there as well. But it is absolutely my biggest mistake and my biggest learning. I had a Kilkenny underage development squad when I was coming up along in the underage football ranks when I was coaching. It was a very strong panel. Sean Maguire has gone on to do great things. Mikey Drennan went on to do great things, but we got to an All Ireland final that year under 14, Ciaran. And at the end of the year, you send players up for their first ever international assessments.
Yeah.
And because we'd reached an All Ireland final, beaten on penalties in an All Ireland final, brilliant squad, I was thinking to myself, okay, we're going to have five, maybe six make this international squad. And after a couple of weeks of assessment, word came back that we had only one. Mikey Drennan was the only one who had made it. Now, there was an absolutely brilliant guy over that Irish panel, a guy called Niall Harrison from the West. I think he's Sligo. And I got on well enough with Niall at the time that I could pick up the phone and give him a call. And not to berate him or ask how the hell have we only won, but literally to ask, you know, what the boys must have let themselves down here a bit. I know they're good players. In what way did they let themselves down, or in what way did they not show as well as I thought they would have? Um, Niall's answer, it was like getting a belt of a frying pan over the head now, to be honest with you. Niall said, Shane, I saw you in this year's Leinster semi-final, Leinster final, All-Ireland semi-final, All-Ireland final. You were absolutely brilliant. If you told those boys to jump off a roof, they wouldn't even question it. They would absolutely do it instantly for you. And because you've got a decent football knowledge, you're giving them good instruction, they're following the instruction, and therefore you're winning games. They come up here to an environment for an assessment where you're not standing on the sideline. You're not making every decision for them, telling them to pass it here, pass it there, which I was doing, Ciaran. I was talking for 90 minutes consistently, and for every training session talking consistently. Um, he says you bring them up into an environment up here like that when you're not there to talk them through the game, and they are absolutely lost. Absolutely lost. I had unwittingly created a scenario where I had completely and utterly destroyed their decision making powers. Completely and utterly. And it just utterly changed my coaching approach from there on, Ciaran. It really, really did. Where it's so much for me now about trying to develop decision makers and giving them that time and space to try and do that and learn by themselves by making mistakes and all of that kind of thing. And yeah, it probably does mean you lose more games maybe than you win sometimes, but
Yeah,
it's resulting in the right outcome rather than the approach I was taking.
yeah, very interesting. What age were you at that time?
Um, Mikey is 31, 17 years ago. So what does that make me? 27-ish, thereabouts.
Yeah,
26, 27.
yeah. Well, it's big responsibility at that age, isn't it? And great, great to learn that the hard way in some ways like that.
Absolutely. Look, I thought I was doing the right thing. You can see how I thought I was doing the right thing
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
players
yeah.
there,
But,
but
but of course,
indirectly it wasn't the right thing.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. But I mean, I'm sure they gained plenty from it as well about like knowledge of the game or whatever. But yeah, for them to act as kind of decision makers themselves on the pitch, it needed something a slight tweaking of it, let's say.
Absolutely.
Very good. Okay, last question then. What's the one thing you'd like to see more of or see less of in the GA world or the coaching world?
Well, this is a mad one, and people are definitely going to laugh. And I'm not even sure if you meant this as a rule, but I've always had a thing in my head that, and this I know this sounds utterly go games kind of stuff, but I've always had a thing in my head that I think it's mad that one individual free taker can be the winning or losing of a game for a team in hurling or Gaelic football. And we brought in a rule at Go Games level here that I genuinely think could work at adult level, which is whoever's fouled takes a free. And now all of a sudden, every player on a team has to practice free taking, and every player on the team has to be able to do that kind of thing, rather than being able to lean on one player. And if your team has a good free taker, you win some games, and if your team has a bad free taker, you lose some games. I actually, and I think it's completely implementable. I think obviously sometimes there isn't a direct player who gets fouled, and in that circumstance, you can put forward your nominated free taker, and they can take it. Look, it's not something we'll ever see, I would think, but at Go Games level, we've brought it in, and it's worked a dream.
Well, it's brilliant. It's brilliant to introduce it at that level, and then they grow up with that, and there's a greater chance of it being implemented all the way up on the pathway. But listen, I agree because like it shouldn't be down to one player, and especially their free kick ability. They might be excellent off the ground or whatever it is, and it shouldn't be the winning or losing of the game. And also a lot of pressure on that player as well.
Yeah.
They might be the main scorer, they might be the free kick, they might have to take the penalties, whatever it is. So
And even your like when you look at your highest scorer charts at the end of the year, sure they mean nothing because obviously the
no,
highest scorers are the people who are your nominated free takers, whereas they all of a sudden have real meaning now because yes, you might have scored a certain amount of frees, but the reason you scored that amount of frees is because you were good enough that you had to be fouled
yeah,
to get that free for yourself for you to take it, if that makes sense. Look, I
yeah,
think, as I say, it's a bit of a mad one, but it is one that I would just love to see.
yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you. We'll start a group about it, definitely. Okay, brilliant. Very interesting. If people want to connect with you, to reach out, to get in touch, what's the best way?
Yeah, look, I'd be fairly active enough there on Twitter. I'm just looking here myself at Shane Keegan 81 on Twitter, and I'd be keeping a good enough eye on my LinkedIn profile as well. Just stick my name into LinkedIn. Like you say, if anybody wants to reach out and anything that can be any way helpful to them at all, give me a direct message through either of those two formats is probably best, Kieran.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks for being so open. Thank you for coming on. I've been wanting to get you on for the last couple of years, and we finally kind of managed to get it organized and everything. I think you've like such a unique career and experience of like for people to understand having somebody who can coach at you know the highest level or close to the highest level across three different sports is amazing. You know, it is really unique because it's so difficult. Like I know myself, I'm I'm in the UEFA B program at the moment, and I'm trying to do
Brilliant.
some, you know, soccer coaching and coming from Gaelic football, and a little bit of hurling. It's difficult because the technical details that, you know, you may not know as well. Like obviously a good coach is a good coach across any sport, but just those little details sometimes it's difficult.
Yeah, I suppose the only thing I'll say on it is we live in an information age, Ciaran. Like I quite simply couldn't have done what I've done in the 80s or arguably even the 90s because so much of my knowledge is learned knowledge, learned via the internet. Like essentially, getting my hands on if there's like nowadays, if there's anything you want to do, there's probably if you read enough and practice it enough and are willing to kind of trial and error things and learn along the way, there's almost nothing that you can't kind of teach yourself to do a little bit. I've got a young fella who enjoys all his team sports, but what he's probably shown a bit of potential most at the moment is just basic athletics running. He just loves long distance running. So I went off and did my first, course with Athletics Ireland a few weeks ago. I mean, I'm coming from a real base level knowledge of zero there again, but starting to pick up a few things on that. And, we're starting to do a weekly session with just me and him on the track now as well. And again, I don't know if you've ever seen much of the story of brother, what's his name? Is it brother Philip, the
Oh,
Cork guy who went to Kenya?
Kenya. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like I was lucky enough to meet him last summer. He was over with Liam Morgan, and I was lucky enough to meet him. Like he has had phenomenal success as an athletics coach. He is completely and utterly self-taught as an athletics coach. Completely and utterly. He had no background in it whatsoever. And I think he's, living proof that you can kind of become operate at a decent level through self-teaching and trial and error, I suppose.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, there's hope for all of us then. That's really interesting. That gives me confidence. Okay, thank you very much, Shane, for coming on again. For any of our audience, just remember head over to dsscoaching.ie and you see our membership there, some of our coaching booklets, online courses, and everything like that, and come and join. Basically, what we've set up is a community of practitioners, a community of coaches, and the kind of stuff that Shane is speaking about there. Okay, thank you for listening, Shane. Thank you very much for coming on again.
Thanks for being here, Kieran.